Welcome to Language Exchange, the podcast that will take your English from okay to good and from good to great. I am Ariel Goodbody, your guest for this show.
Good morning, everybody. As you may hear from this amazing starting, I wanted to thank mostly Ariel Goodbody, the guest of today of this Language Exchange podcast. Thank you so much for joining today. How are you? Tell us, to your spectator, how you're doing today.
I am doing very well, thank you. It's a lovely rainy morning here in England, but I'm doing very well. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much for joining and for accepting our request. Our students will surely love it. But first of all, I want to talk about you. There are a lot of mystery behind this podcast, and I know you have a lot of listeners behind this. So tell me about the beginning of everything. How did you started, and how do you feel the necessities to give a service, because indeed it is a service for all the learners around. And tell me how this started.
Okay, so in late 2017, so I graduated from university in 2016. I studied linguistics, and I've always been interested in languages, but I really didn't know what I was going to do as my job until late 2017. And that was when I started a course called the CELTA, which stands for Certificate in English Language Teaching for Adults. So it's a teaching qualification to teach English as a foreign language. And I studied that for 6 months. And pretty soon after I started, I realized, wow, I love teaching. Which is strange, because I always thought before that I could never be a teacher, that I would find it so hard, that the students would bully me. Like, I really just didn't see myself as a teacher. And I kind of only did the course because I was just like, I don't know what to do. My mum studied the CELTA a long time ago and taught English, so I just thought it was worth a try. So as I studied the course, I found out about different teaching methods. And because I have a background in linguistics, in the science of language, I did my own research into how does the brain learn languages? How do we acquire languages? And I discovered a lot about the best ways to teach. And essentially, the way we all learn is through comprehensible input, which is a fancy word. It basically just means reading and listening to things that we understand, right? So it's through passive input that we learn the most when we're learning a language, and we have to really understand what it means, otherwise it's not going to help us. So as I realized this, there are plenty of resources online for English, but a lot of them are just, grammar exercises and very boring readings, or they're too difficult as well, often for beginners. And I really discovered that there was a lack of story-based resources for learners. And I've always really enjoyed writing, and I just sort of realized, like, wow, there's a real gap here, because I started teaching with storytelling, and there are actually lots of language teachers now who use storytelling. There's a technique called TPRS, which is based around creating stories with students. But there wasn't really, and there are some books based on this, graded readers, so easy language, novels and things like that. But there really wasn't any audio content. So I've had a bit of experience. I've done YouTube videos, and I've edited a few podcast episodes in the past. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to give it a try. I kept my expectations low. I thought the first year of a podcast, they often don't get very successful, right? It usually takes a few years for a podcast to get successful. And I've just been so surprised by the reaction. I'm overjoyed, really. I'm so happy, because around like 4 or 5 months in, the number of downloads just exploded, and now we have 15,000 listens a week, and one or two of the episodes are almost at 10,000 listens, and we haven't even finished. I started in January, right? It hasn't been around for that long, so I'm just so happy that it's got so successful, and I've really enjoyed talking to all the listeners.
And we are happy too, because we really love the stories. And the reason actually is not a common story. So how do you think that the learners, if they starting approaching your method, because I really think is a game changer. Like live on teaching in English on school, and as we know as Italian learners, it's not changing so much. Probably the teachers don't appreciate teaching. So as you said before, you don't actually born as a teacher, okay? You just grow up and understand it. It's simply helping people, understanding them. So you felt like the necessity of creating an audio content, which is really, really great. So how audio, because learning a language should change through times, as you studied before, as we all studied, as I talked about in the last podcast with Emma, our colleague. The method are changing, but not so much. Do you think technology could really help getting inside the school, could really help the students getting the point out of the language? Because English is growing so much as it's spreading all over the world. So also audio stories and technology, how could it help the learners, giving them motivation also, and could it speed up? Because online you may find the method, I'm gonna teach you English in just 1 month, you're gonna speak like a native, which doesn't work most of the times. But do you really think that method like podcasts, which I realize helps me so much also for advanced learners, and also because I really find the necessity to learn vocabulary, and it really improves my pronunciation too. Even though I'm a teacher, there is always something to learn. Do you really think technology and those kind of methods will substitute the normal boring book, or the school will notice still, a revolution of teaching? What do you think about?
Well, yeah, I wanted to say I can tell you listen to a lot of podcasts and things because you have very good pronunciation.
Thanks to you, mate.
Well, as for technology, I think it's there are two sides, right? So absolutely, for me, studying Spanish, that's the language I mainly study at the moment. Listening to podcasts, watching shows on Netflix, it's so much easier than before, and using ebooks as well. And I think what it's done is it's given learners the power to control their learning. They can, really choose their own path and very easily access all kinds of resources. So I think it's fantastic in that sense. However, I think sometimes we focus too much on technology. In Italy, in most schools, do you still use blackboards or whiteboards, or do you use like smart boards, interactive whiteboards?
We do use blackboards in a really bad way though, because that you can use Blackboard, it's totally fine. It's just another method to show something, to show scheme, to show some kind of a way to do, okay? But probably most of the teachers, please teachers, if you're listening to these podcasts, don't unsubscribe from the channel and do listen to the podcast of Ariel. I really think they didn't have the method, because in their learning process, they've been like just given continuous information and wrong information on how to teach. For example, how do you see literature by this point of view? Should teachers teach literature in school? Is it a nice learning method? And I will give you my opinion later after yours, because I really think you're more deeper into literature, as long as you're a really nice writer, as long as we all appreciate your stories. But I want to know really your opinion inside it. So is literature important?
Well, so the reason I asked the question about the blackboards, I just want to clarify what I meant. Because in schools in the UK, a lot of them now have interactive whiteboards, which are these like electronic boards that are connected to a projector and you can write on them. And theoretically, they're great because you can take a document and write over it, and you can use it as a normal whiteboard. But in practice, they're really annoying because the pens don't really work as well as on a traditional board. The software gets out of date. One day they might break. And so many times I've been in a school where I just want a real whiteboard. Even a blackboard would be fine, but not this stupid, unnecessary technology at times.
Okay.
But like you said, there are good ways and there are bad ways of using anything. I always say from my classes, all I need is something I can write on, whether it's a board, paper, a wall. I need some pens, and probably that's it, right? Maybe some chairs and some props or something, but everything else can be negotiated. But I'm glad you mentioned literature, because I think again, with technology, sometimes we focus too much on doing everything online when actually you can't beat reading. Reading really is the most effective way of improving your knowledge of any language. There was a study that showed that about 70% of the words we know in our native language and any foreign language we learn, we know through reading, because reading contains much richer language than when we talk. And it's also just a lot more language. If you watch a TV show for an hour versus reading a book for an hour, you get so much more language from the book. So I think reading, when I teach my students, I'm always saying please read outside of class, even if it's 5 minutes a day, it will help. And I kind of see my podcast as a bridge, because it's very hard to find good materials that are easy. When you're learning English, you can't read a book for native speakers. And there are books like Graded Readers, which are for learners, but they're not always that interesting, or I don't know, I've looked at some of them, I haven't been super content. So the aim with the podcast is to be a bridge to reading, where the stories are short, but they're very comprehensible, and they're stories that we all know, right? Like fairy tales, legends. Okay, some of them are original as well, but they don't. A lot of traditional literature, it's very discussing the beauty of the morning light as it hits them. It's not that, right? They're real stories.
For 1,000 pages.
Yeah, right, exactly. I think when I talk about literature, I mean all kinds of literature. I mean Harry Potter, The Hunger Games, books that are fun to read. If a book isn't fun at all to read, I probably wouldn't read it. So yeah.
Okay, this sounds amazing. Thank you. But I want to know, I've been listening to a lot of your stories. I focus more on listening, because I already know most of the words you say, so I don't feel the need of reading. And the best part is that I can go play on Bluetooth on my car and just start listening for the whole time. And that's great. I never get boring of it. So the question is, when do you get your inspiration of the stories? How do you get this? Just you write your own story, isn't it? So when do you get the inspiration from?
Yeah, well, I am a strong believer in the idea that you can't wait for inspiration. You can't say, oh, okay, I'm going to write something when I feel inspired. No, you have to work, right? Writing is like anything else. It's work. No one would say you want to learn piano. It's oh, I'll practice when the music comes to me. Well, no, the music isn't going to come to you. You have to sit down and practice, right? And it's okay, at the moment, I'm focusing on studying for an exam. I'm doing a Spanish exam next month, so I haven't been writing so much. But for the last few months before this, every day, sit down at the beginning of the day and write for about 30 minutes to an hour. And sometimes I'm taking fairy tales and folk tales and legends from different countries and adapting them. And that's much easier because I'm kind of just rewriting them. And sometimes I'm maybe, oh, I've got an idea already. Sometimes I'm like, I'm just going to sit down and free write for like 10 minutes. I'm just going to write and just keep writing and don't stop and see what happens. Okay. And sometimes really great stories can come out of that. So it's honestly just a case of the more you work at it, the more inspiration you have, kind of thing.
Okay, you basically changed the mind of the procrastinator. So guys, if you really, yeah, that's the key point. You just make the point, because if you want to practice on something and you really want to see the results, you really need to practice it. But what about results? I know you're a teacher and you do teach on italki. So guys, if you're looking for lessons, so go on italki and go on his website. I'm gonna send a link down below and check it out, please. The podcast, which is a really great resource. So what do you say to your student for practice? Because, you know, results